Hello students, in this lesson we are going to take into account the second type of animal tissue, that is the connective tissue. There is a lot of lot of explanation hidden in the name itself, that basically it performs the function of connecting a tissue to other tissue. That is why it is known as connective tissue. It connects a tissue to other tissue, or it connects a tissue to an organ. So basically it performs the function of connection, and there are 8 different types of connective tissue which perform that function. Now let us see what are its features and functions. As the name suggests, the function, most important one, is connecting and binding a tissue to other tissue. As in the case of epithelial tissue, you might have read about it, that above lies the epithelial tissue, in between there is a basement membrane, and underneath there is connective tissue. In most of our organs and tubules and other body parts where the connective tissue is present, it is present beneath the epithelial tissue. So somehow it is performing the function of binding the epithelial tissue with the subcutaneous layer. Subcutaneous layer, of course, would be formed of connective tissue only. Now the second function that it performs is it provides the structural framework. If I talk about any organism that is belonging to animal kingdom, it would have these tissues, and there would be a structural framework inside the body that would be formed by the connective tissue with a boundary formed by epithelial tissue. Please pay attention. There would be connective tissue and the boundary would be of epithelial tissue. There would be supply of muscular tissue and nervous tissue, which would be all covered under epithelial tissue. So what is making a connection between the epithelium, muscular tissue and nervous tissue is the connective tissue. Then it also provides the mechanical support. As in the case of bones and cartilages, they are for mechanical support. The names that I am taking, like bone, cartilage, areolar tissue, these are types of connective tissue only, which we are going to discuss later on. Third function that they perform is of body defense. When I say body defense, I am talking about the immune system and the wear and tear that is caused, repair of that wear and tear. So body defense is done by the immune system, which is carried out by blood and lymph, and that also is a type of connective tissue only. Those two are the fluid connective tissues, which have specialized cells which perform the function of immune system. So body defense is also one of the functions which is performed by connective tissue. Then we have tissue repair. There are specific fibers inside the connective tissue which are secreted by the cells of connective tissue, which are responsible for the tissue repair wherever wear and tear has taken place, because most of the subcutaneous part of the body is formed by connective tissue and it repairs itself by this process only. Then there is another function that is done by the connective tissue, which is fat storage. Storage of fat, lipids which are converted into fat and then stored inside the animal body, and of course they are very much required because most of the vitamins are fat soluble and they need fat for that purpose. So their uptake, so fat storage is done in the adipose tissue, which yet again is connective tissue only. Now when we talk about this classification that you can see over here, there are 8 different types of tissues, as you can see. How this classification is made? It is made up on the basis of the 2 basic components which form this connective tissue. We talked in epithelial tissue that there is not much of matrix, there are only cells which are resting on a basement membrane. In this case, we have 2 basic components. One would be the cells which would form the connective tissue, and other would be the extracellular matrix that would be present inside the tissue, and the cells would be suspended in this extracellular matrix. Depending upon the type of the extracellular matrix, we divide the tissue into these types. Depending upon the type of extracellular matrix and of course the cells, the tissues is divided into different categories. Now what this extracellular matrix is made up of? It is made up of protein fibers. It is made up of amorphous ground substance, which is further made up of glycoproteins or glycoaminoglycans. These are the compounds that would form the amorphous ground substance, and these are the protein fibers which would be present in the extracellular matrix. As the name suggests, it would not be part of cells. So it is kind of, suppose this is your tissue, connective tissue I am talking about, there would be extracellular matrix. It could be thick, it could be thin, it could be fluid, it could be very dense, and the cells would be suspended in it like this. So this is how a connective tissue, if I have to simply explain what connective tissue is, it would be like this, that there would be a matrix behind it which would be proteinaceous, of course, there would be no cells in it, and the cells would be suspended in it like this. So this is one simplest description of connective tissue. Now depending on the type of this matrix and depending on the type of the cells which are present, we have these types of connective tissue which are found in animals. Now what are the types? First one is areolar, second is adipose, third is white fibrous, fourth is tendon, fifth is ligament, then we have cartilage, bone and blood. In this lesson we are going to take into account these three, because these three are somewhat similar and the rest ones have some similar specifications. Now these three, basically the areolar tissue is providing the bulk. When we talk about that the connective tissue lies beneath the epithelial tissue, we are talking about areolar tissue. We are talking about that tissue which is going to have the cellular component and the matrix, and that would lie beneath the epithelial tissue. So when I say that epithelial tissue has connective tissue that comes after basement membrane, I am basically referring to the areolar tissue. Areolar tissue is going to have these two basic components, because entire connective tissue would have two basic components. Now let us see what is its matrix made up of. When we talk about its matrix, it would be having somewhat fibrous matrix inside it. Then we will have cells. Now inside this matrix you would find yellow elastin fibers and white collagen fibers. I am coming to that, but before that we need to know that what are the type of cells that would be present in the areolar tissue. First that we need to know, it would be fibroblasts. Fibro, something that would be related to fibers. Blasts, that means, you know, blastocele. This blast word is used when something is being generated. So when fibers are being generated by a particular type of cells, they are termed as fibroblasts. The second one are macrophages. Macro means huge, phages means something related to phagocytosis. So these are large sized cells which would be phagocytosizing external particles. Anything which has come from outside which is not suitable for this particular tissue. That means, in short, foreign bodies which can be harmful for the tissue. And last one is mast cells. What are mast cells? These are the cells which are responsible for inflammatory responses. So anything inflammatory has come inside the tissue, there would be an anti-inflammatory response caused by mast cells by the release of histamine proteins. Now what you need to remember is that the fibroblasts are the cells which are going to release or form the fibers, which would further be of two types. One would be collagen fiber. You might have heard this is the fiber most extensive in the animal world, and other is elastin fiber. When we talk about collagen fiber, remember the color white, and when we talk about elastin fiber, remember the color yellow. So I did discuss that there is a function of tissue repair. Tissue repair is done by collagen fibers that are going to be present in the matrix. So matrix would be fibrous in case of areolar tissue. Fibroblasts would form these fibers. These fibers would form the matrix. There would be macrophages which would be present inside the cell here and there for phagocytosis, and mast cells for any sort of inflammatory response. Now in order to understand inflammatory response, you might have been bitten by a bee or a mosquito in your lifetime. So that swelling thing that is being caused, that occurs in the areolar tissue, and that has been brought by mast cells. After some time that swelling settles down, because all the cells which have undergone anti-inflammatory response, they are phagocytosized by the macrophages. Now come to the next tissue, that is the adipose tissue. When I talk about adipose tissue, then again we are going to have a matrix which would be fibrous, and it would be having collagen fibers along with elastin fibers. It won't be only collagen fibers, because collagen fibers lack elasticity. Elastin fibers have elasticity, so they both would be in coordination with each other for the purpose of movement and the rest things. Now when we talk about cells, over here the characteristic feature of adipose tissue is adipocytes. Now when I am talking about adipose tissue, I am referring to fat storage cells. This tissue is responsible for storage of fats inside the animal body. So there are adipocytes. Now what happens in the adipocytes is that the fat storage just pushes the cytoplasm below the plasma membrane. So this entire area inside the adipocyte has to be covered by the fat. So fat storage is the purpose that they solve. They push the cytoplasm towards the plasma membrane, almost they are cornered. The cytoplasm is almost cornered, and there are again fibroblasts, mast cells and macrophages, just like areolar tissue, which we studied just now, that there are cells. Only thing that is the characteristic feature of this tissue is that there are adipocytes, which are known as fat cells, which are responsible for fat storage. Now you need to remember that where this tissue is present inside our body, it would be there wherever there is fat storage that is required. So when I talk about kidney, it would have adipose tissue. When I talk about thighs and muscles, there would be adipose tissue making way through your muscles into the subcutaneous layer. Then we have another region which is having lot of adipose tissue, that is bone marrow, so that storage of fat material could be done. Okay, so we have the matrix which is fibrous, yet again like areolar tissue, and we have cells which are adipocytes. That is to be remembered. Now coming to the third, that is white fibrous tissue. Over here this tissue is distensible. When I say distensible, that means it will have elastin fibers few and collagen fibers would be more. So the matrix would be more fibrous as compared to the earlier two ones, but the fibers would be distensible. Now in white fibrous tissue, we have rich collagen fibers in the matrix, and the cells are only fibroblasts, which would release somewhat elastin and lot of collagen fibers. We do not have cells like adipocytes, we do not have mast cells, we have only fibroblasts. That is why this white fibrous tissue is very dense. It is regular because most of the fibers are arranged in a pattern with irregular collagen fibers, and this fibrous tissue is present inside the sutures, the fibrous joints that are present inside our body, that are present in skull sutures. They are not movable at any case. So white fibrous tissue is non-distensible. Then we have tendons. Tendons, you must be knowing that it joins a bone to muscle, a bone to skeletal muscle, and it is not movable. Then we have ligament. It is having more of collagen fibers, hence not movable. Ligament joins bone to bone, easy in movement. So bone to bone joint, it would have more of yellow elastin fibers, that's why it is movable. Then we have cartilage, the semi-solid tissue that is present over the bones and in most parts of our body. It is further of four types. Then we have bone. I need not to tell you what bone is. It is ossified tissue. It is connective tissue only, which is having a very dense matrix rich in sulfate and phosphate. And then we have fluid connective tissue, that is the blood, which is not having a dense matrix, rather the matrix is plasma and it is fluid with cellular components spread in it. So basically you get to understand that connective tissue would have two basic components, first being the cell and second being the ground substance, and all the classification that we have over here is made on the basis what is the ground substance, how dense it is, and what are the cells present inside it. And then we have 8 different classifications of the connective tissue. We did take into account 3 classifications. We did see their characteristic features. So you get areolar tissue, you get adipose tissue, and you get white fibrous tissue. What you need to learn is that what is the matrix and cellular composition and where these tissues are present inside human body. Thank you.